When you think business in the Gulf, what pops into your head? Probably massive state projects and, traditional male-dominated boardrooms. But we're about to dive into an economic story that completely flips that script on its head, a powerful, under-the-radar trend that's happening right now in Kuwait.
All right, let's just lay it out. On one side, you've got that classic media image, and on the other, you've got what's actually happening on the ground. And the reality? Well, it turns out Kuwait is the most female-driven entrepreneurial market in the entire region. That's a massive contrast, right? And that's exactly where our story gets interesting. So, yeah, we're going to look past the usual headlines. We're digging into a shift that's maybe a bit quieter, but trust me, it's way more important.
And it's super important to get this straight. What we're talking about here isn't some kind of PR campaign or a social initiative. No, this is a real hard economic pattern, and it's all backed up by one really surprising number. Okay, to really get why this is such a big deal, let's zoom out for a second. Globally, what percentage of startups are founded by women? You're looking at maybe 15%, 20% on a good day. So keep that number, 15%, in your head. Now look at the bar for Kuwait.
Which, of course, brings us to the big question. What is Kuwait's actual number?
Get ready for this. 41%. 41. That means a staggering 41% of startups in Kuwait are led or co-founded by women. We're talking more than double the global average. This isn't just a small difference, it's a massive economic outlier that just makes you go, whoa, what's happening here? And look, this isn't just about having a seat at the table. This is what some people are calling functional dominance. It's not just symbolic. We're talking about women actively leading, shaping, and pretty much defining huge parts of the country's private sector.
Okay, so what does this actually look like on the ground? How are these new rules and new businesses changing the game for Kuwait's economy? For the longest time, there was this stereotype, right, that female-led businesses in the Gulf were all about consumer stuff, fashion, food, that kind of thing. Well, as you're about to see, that idea is completely outdated. All right, let's take a look at a company called Seeds, founded by Yasmin Al-Kandari and User Al-Mutawa. And this is not a lifestyle brand, no way. They are working at this super complex intersection of engineering and big money capital planning. We're talking advising on massive infrastructure projects like airports, helping them meet green building standards. So yeah, they are competing and winning in a really technical, heavy-duty sector. Now for our second example, and this one is built on a really powerful idea. And that idea is this. Female social capital translates directly into economic power when platforms are designed around local behavior. Think about that. It's not about just copying a model from somewhere else. It's about tapping into the cultural strengths that are already there.
And this is perfectly captured by the model of Boutiquat, which is a Kuwaiti e-commerce giant. Seriously, these guys are huge. And they didn't just try to be the next Amazon. Instead, they got smart. They looked at how purchasing decisions were already being made and then built a system around it, tapping into the power of female trust networks. So they let influencers set up their own digital shops, which put relationships first. And the result? Crazy high basket sizes and customers who are incredibly loyal.
But here's the thing, it's important to understand that Kuwait's startup scene isn't just happening in a vacuum. This whole trend is part of a much bigger regional network. It's not just an isolated thing. Because at the end of the day, these ecosystems, they don't stop at the border. What happens in one country sends ripples all across the region. And a perfect example of this is what's going on just over the border in Saudi Arabia. You've got the Tawak Academy, which has the region's first ever all-women Apple developer academy. I mean, they're training hundreds of female developers in some serious high-level coding. And what that does is create this incredible cross-border pipeline of tech talent that fuels new businesses everywhere, including back in Kuwait. So, what's the bottom line here? What does all this mean in the real world? Well, it looks like we're staring at a huge investment blind spot, and that has some pretty serious implications for both investors and policymakers. So let's compare two different ways of looking at this. You have the typical Western model, which often talks about empowerment by getting more representation in old, established institutions. But the model that's emerging in the Gulf, it's different. Over there, empowerment is happening right on the balance sheets. It's happening through direct ownership of new, exciting companies. And this leads to some really clear, practical takeaways.
If you're an investor, it means you've got to rethink how you find founders. If you don't, you're going to miss out on a massive chunk of market-ready companies. And if you're a policymaker, it's time to move past basic awareness campaigns and start focusing on getting growth capital to these businesses that have already proven they can succeed.
So let's wrap it up. What we're seeing is this powerful mix of high education levels, real digital savvy, and these incredibly strong social networks. And all that together is giving female founders in Kuwait some real structural advantages in the private sector. And all this leaves us with one last big thought to chew on. You know, the rest of the world is busy debating when and how women in the Gulf will be empowered. But maybe, just maybe, the data from Kuwait is telling us we're asking the wrong question. Maybe the real question is, are they already leading the way?